The walkers are evolving.
Wow.
They're dead. They're not evolving.
Variant cohorts you referred to in our last communication. We haven't seen anything like that here at all. Nothing close. Nothing close. Nothing close. Here at all. Nothing close.
Science is a liar sometimes.
Oh boy.
It takes an impact to the cranium to stop them, which means the brain is alive. Degraded as it may be, and if it's alive, it can change.
What the fuck?
So to be honest with you, I haven't watched The Walking Dead in quite a while. I held on through the Negan saga, struggled to stay attached after the post-Rick time skip, and fell off as the Whisperers started to hit the scene. One thing that always persisted in the back of my mind was how the threat of the zombies walkers stayed pretty much a consistent threat despite never really changing, while the living were of course always the larger enemy. The opening clip from season 9 episode 8 had Eugene discussing the possible idea that the walkers were evolving, that over time even a rotting brain could adapt and change, because in the world where the dead come back to life, anything is possible. But is that really the case? At the start of the series, the walkers are somewhat fast moving, can use tools at a very rudimentary level, and could even problem solve to a very basic level. One can make the argument that since it was near the beginning of the mass outbreak that every walker present was freshly dead, so more of their brain activity from being alive was still there in a very diminished fashion. But from those humble and well-directed beginnings, did we see the walkers remain a one-note threat for the better of over 10 seasons, only really posing any kind of danger when in large numbers, or when the plot demanded they become stealthy, or as the continuity would later dictate them as being a variant called lurkers that conveniently go dormant when someone of importance is walking by. But hey, Zombieland 2 didn't make ninja variants a thing because it wasn't a plot device or anything. The idea of the walkers evolving was actually largely a part of the Whisperers donning walker skin masks to hide their scent and move among the dead, tricking the living into thinking walkers were becoming intelligent. It was a veritable bait and switch. While the idea of crazed maniacs hiding in hordes of walkers to attack like a normal human is terrifying, it doesn't really add up to anything of note for the walkers themselves in their own development. Just another human threat with a different gimmick. It wouldn't be until the final season of the 11-season run of The Walking Dead that the idea of these evolving walkers, otherwise known as variants, would come into play. We would see walkers that knew how to climb barricades and walls, and even take off armor to bite survivors. The sheer sight of seeing these dead that have been known to purely limp around and just reach at people from walls or gates, to suddenly see some of them climb surfaces, stuns longtime survivors enough to where they just sit there guffawed and stare, and or let themselves be easily killed. I mean, look at this clip here. Did this guard really have to die like this, while inadvertently opening the gate for the Horde to spur a prison ending 2.0? Like Negan, he sees a walker climbing a small surface and he just goes,
What the fuck?
I mean, is them climbing that much of a hitch in contingency when you could still shoot them while they're climbing, or outrun them, or use a stick and poke them off, or anything? But it would be a gimmick to lead into numerous other spin-offs like World Beyond with the Beehive Zombie, Negan and Maggie's Dead City, traveling to New York, Rick and Michonne's own spin-off wherever that is, and probably the spin-off where these evolved or variant zombies will crop up the most with the Daryl Dixon series in France. Now, the idea of fucking Daryl Dixon, the redneck guy that liked to use motorcycles, traveling the entire Atlantic Ocean to get his own show in France of all places, doesn't make sense to me, but why would France hold any significance in the first place? Well, apparently, in the French laboratory La Biomédecine DDMI, the advent of the wildfire virus that started the zombie outbreak spurred from this very specific origin point. Being in close contact with the Center for Disease Control in the United States, both facilities worked at making a cure for the pandemic before wide-scale power failures cut them off from each other. While the CDC was left to fend on its own and work with the most basic of the walkers the world had to offer, apparently the French facility, in its efforts to make a cure, had accidentally concocted a new variant of the virus that made walkers stronger, more agile, and more intelligent. These variant cohorts being predominant throughout the entirety of Eurasia, with little to none cropping up in the Americas, so this virus went airborne and spread across the world. Sure, fine enough, airborne diseases can be a legitimate nightmare and something that is real. I mean, I would know, I've played Plague Inc. before, but how would corpses with rotting, deteriorating brains with non-functioning organs after 10 years be stronger, faster, and, I guess, smarter? It already did not make sense that walkers, after 11 seasons of not changing in any way, shape, or form, in a 10-year canonical timeline, just suddenly start climbing, peeling armor off, and picking up rocks and shit to attack survivors and open up their defenses. And that was just in the United States, where possibly the wildfire virus was the most diminished in its reach. Some say that depending on geographical location within the United States, do these variations in the walkers occur because of the surrounding environment. Hence the beehive zombie, the mud zombies, and a lot of other stuff we see. Yeah, that all makes sense. But them suddenly learning, evolving, and becoming more diverse in their methods of combat and traversal is just something out of left field entirely when it's so far into a series that started at the beginning of her previous decade. Executive producer and showrunner Angela Kang said this during a Comic-Con press conference. In some way, it is a throwback to some of the walkers we saw back in the very first season of The Walking Dead. But not everybody encountered those walkers. It's almost like it was a variant that just was regional. And anytime there is a change to the rules, that means that people just need to be that much on their game because they're realizing that the methods that they use to survive don't quite work the same way. Our survivors need to be very smart and try to adjust to that, and that is one of the many conflicts that they will be dealing with in the final block of episodes. With Angela's Kang's words kinda ringing hollow for me, ideas from a director that was fired from the series over a decade ago, and his ideas not even touched until now. This feels like a response to people constantly bitching for the better part of a decade, saying something like, how come the walkers in episode 1 and 2 were fast and climbing fences and using tools to break glass and stuff? Basically just to appease the overly analytical zombie nerds, like somebody like me, or somebody like the channel Clashed PR, while also being like, oh look, the zombies are more dangerous now. You better stay tuned. I wonder what they're capable of. There is one fallacy in Angela's statement. She said variants were regional, that these smart zombies or fast zombies were only in certain parts of the country or certain parts of the world. And the walkers in Atlanta at the time were some of those variants. Yet, Rick and many others had returned to Atlanta for various reasons and excursions over the course of the series, like when they went to go save Beth. And yet they didn't encounter anything like them again over the course of 10 seasons. Neither did these variant walkers migrate away from Atlanta, as the show's second season had stated that hordes of infected were moving away from large cities to go and find more food. These variant zombies just poof, vanished. You're saying that they exist out there, that they're regional. What region were they in? Because we never saw them again until the final season. the obvious original conclusion as to why walkers stopped being agile, speedy, and had the thought process to use tools because, you know what? Their body and minds were starting to rot. Deterioration limiting the body and mind. It just made sense. You know why the walkers being consistently boring in their slow and rather unintimidating march was a thing? Because rot, rigor mortis, and natural decay would cause that. Not only that, but the brain activity of a brain that's only using its brainstem would do that as well. It made sense that they became less of a threat as time dragged on. But with that in mind, there is also something else that never made sense with the show as it moved on. And that being, why did people that had just turned, they had died and now they're reanimated as walkers, how come they didn't retain their motor skills, high speed, and the ability to climb right after dying? And instead acted in exact similar patterns to walkers that died years ago and rotted nearly to the bone. How can any walkers evolve when there has been little to no proof this was a thing since episode 1 over the course of 177 episodes? How can a brain that retained so much on day 1 of their infection, or I guess day 1 of the outbreak because some other people got infected along the way, and then rot for 10 years, and then suddenly regain those skills from day 1 again after those synapses have long since died out? But wait, there's more. Then the show suddenly says this. Oh, there's a stronger variation in Eurasia. That Dr. Edwin Jenner, you remember that doctor from episode 6, 5 and all that in the first season? He talked about all of this with his overseas cohorts. He knew about the stronger variations that were roaming around Europe and Asia, but failed to never mention this to Rick, that variations in general exist. Jenner told Rick the full details in secret to him over whispers of how the virus worked, how it was airborne, how everyone was currently infected with the wildfire virus, and how when you die, you will turn if the brain is not destroyed. But in this long explanation of how it really functions, he didn't mention a thing about variants or any information from France that he specifically knew about at that point. You would think telling him about the potential for stronger, faster, and even smarter zombies would be vital information. It's not like he cared about it being government top secret information at this point. The dude was about to nuke himself in the CDC center explosion. He didn't give a fuck at that point. I mean, he could have easily just said this. Hey Rick, everyone in the world is infected, and when they die, they turn no matter what unless you destroy the brain. Sucks, right? Oh, by the way, I've been talking to people in France. This thing is global, and there are apparently different types of walkers that are better, faster, and stronger out there too, and there are variants across the country. Actually, nah. Ignore that last part. You probably won't have to worry about that. You'll see them pop up again in like 10 years or something. I don't know. I'll be dead. You can easily come back at me for previously praising a similar universe for doing the exact same thing when it comes to zombies long term. George A. Romero zombies do evolve and learn to use tools, become semi-intelligent, climb and retain memories of their former lives to a certain degree over long periods of time. But you know what Romero's universe did to actually have that make sense? It consistently leaned towards that conclusion with each of its entries over time. Night of the Living Dead had zombies using tools and avoiding fire. Dawn, they go towards malls and know where safe havens are upon turning after dying. Day, they can learn to use stuff, communicate, bond, and use weapons. And then Land, they go all out with each and every of those previous elements. I think this could be chalked up to just being that George A. Romero was the primary director director for all of the movies, while The Walking Dead would kind of bounce around its directors and the vision they had for the series, and so what that meant for the walkers. Now they're saying they want them to evolve, even though the primary directive of the series for most of its run was about the people being the actual monsters. The Walking Dead is like those writer memes where they want to get to the cool moments but don't know how to get there legitimately, so they just fill up a bunch of time so they can just get to those moments. And it's a big reason I stopped watching. A lot of slow parts to get to just anything that carries the show outside its usual formula. And you know what the advertising did to talk about these variant zombies? It showed a zombie climbing. Holy shit. And then you know what came after the zombie climbing? People being the dumbest motherfuckers you have ever seen, but having walkers evolve suddenly close to the end of the original big zombie series just to be like, oh, it happens for a little bit. Check out the other 5 shows to see what it fully means and what can really happen with the variant walkers. This feels like this is the only interesting thing they could do to market their Marvel-like cinematic universe they have been trying to pump out since Fear the Walking Dead, but also to attach other characters to other series to get people actually watching. To tease that stronger, faster, and well, not smarter zombies, as Scott Gimple puts it, world beyond wise, I just would say I wouldn't co-sign on the word smart for the walkers. But there's something going on there. Negan and Maggie's spinoff has something called a Walker King that is just a few walkers fused together, aka the Rat King from The Last of Us 2. But to chalk these kinds of things up to regional variants where they're kinda smarter and have just different forms, when it's been 10 years and the survivors never interacted with anything like this, and you know, walkers tend to migrate over time when they can't find food, ain't ever gonna make sense to me going forward. And now that France apparently made a stronger variation that we have only seen one of that Daryl is shipping out to, it still does not make sense because, again, it's 10 years later. Some kind of rot or something. I mean, I would be behind a series starting from the origins in France and seeing the variants in their very beginnings and how it would have worked more effectively. But nope, we have to have the recognizable characters alongside the continuity to get those views and add revenue up. I don't plan on watching much of The Walking Dead as I am just permanently burnt out on it. I know I'm the zombie guy, but with all these spin-offs, it's just way too much to consume. Kinda like that one walker after he ate Lori. Too bloated and unable to move. Maybe I'll try the new series if they catch my attention, who knows. But as for now, them evolving and having variants after all this time just does not make sense, even if it's across the damn world. We would have had some kind of hint towards that at this point, with it being an airborne virus. I am standing by that statement because it's just a shoehorned in element to get ratings. That about wraps up this short video on The Walking Dead as it reaches new levels to evolve, although it feels like it's holding an Everstone at this point. Do you embrace the new format of walkers the numerous spin-offs are leaning towards? Do you think how it's executed is just blatantly stupid or super cool and scary? Let me know in the comments. Special shout out to my Patreon patrons and YouTube channel members for supporting the channel and getting to be cool enough to be on this list here. You might have noticed my voice sounds a little hoarse. I am still getting over COVID and my voice is still going to be a little raspy and I've been going through some other stuff. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'm Zach, aka Wow Such Gaming. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay evolved, and stay wow.